The event will begin shortly, just waiting for our audience members to join us. Thank you for your patience. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalia Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you all to another edition of KiwiTech's exclusive Female Founders Day in partnership with the 200 Billion Club, a quarterly event we started in NYC in 2018 with a mission to create exciting fundraising opportunities for female entrepreneurs. As a startup ecosystem, we believe in walking the talk and bringing more awareness to this mission by starting conversations and showcasing our top women lead startups to help them raise capital. Today, we have a fantastic panel discussion on women founders and VCs empowering success through best practices and resources, followed by 8 premium startup presentation. But before that, I would like to invite Amy McCauley, Vice President, VC and Corporate Partnerships at KiwiTech, to give a quick overview of the company. Over to you, Amy.
Hi, Natalia. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. As Natalia said, I am VP of Investor Relations and Corporate Partnerships. I was also at the very first Female Founders Day back in 2018 as both an investor and a co-founder. So I am really, really excited to see that we've come this far and we have so many amazing female founders within our portfolio. So a little bit about the company background. About KiwiTech, we are a global community of innovators, investors, mentors, and enterprises. We have over 500 portfolio companies, 3,000 investors within our network, and we've raised over 100 million in capital. We have 300 mentors, 100 million has been invested as tech services into our portfolio companies, and we have now gotten to 100 networking events annually. So our milestones and roadmap. So in 2012, our founders scaled a content technology company, Aptara, to 5,000 people and sold it for 144 million. In 2013, the KiwiTech startup program was launched. By 2017, we had launched our demo days and had over 100 portfolio companies. 2019, we launched the 808 Startup Series, the Entrepreneur Workshop, and we expanded into the Middle East. By 2020 and 21, we have over 500 portfolio companies. We've gone to 100 events. We acquired Graphite Financial and launched GTM crowdfunding services, and we have 3 acquisitions in the pipeline. On track to becoming an ecosystem of 1,000+ portfolio companies by 2024. So our startup partnership model for US-based qualifying startups. KiwiTech provides a 50% in-kind to qualifying startups. For example, if you have a technology development project that would cost $500,000, KiwiTech takes $250,000 in the form of equity in your current company at your current valuation. $250,000 is paid to KiwiTech in cash during the course of the project by you, the startup. So our deal flow from 2019 to 2022. We contacted 120,000 companies. That led to 67,000 positive responses. That went on to 16,000 calls with CEOs. Into our phase 3, we had 13,000 meetings with CEOs, and that led to 6,800 deals reviewed, and an additional 308 portfolio companies were added. So our KiwiTech ecosystem roadmap. So our stakeholders are our portfolio companies, the investor network, incubators and accelerators, and corporate communities. Our services are technology products, finance and accounting, digital marketing, and equity crowdfunding. We recently launched our Web3 Center of Excellence, and in the pipeline, we have Emerging Markets Center of Excellence. We also have the community impact is with our local partnerships, and our ecosystem supports has global capabilities. Sorry. Here's a list of the ecosystem of events that we've had. Last year, we had our Arena 24, which was a 24-hour pitch event globally. We have our family office panel, angel investor panels, our BEM demo days, Hispanic founders, and of course, today's Female Founders Day. I'd like to turn it back over to our moderators, and good luck, everyone. And I'm so glad that everyone's here, and thank you, panelists, for being here. I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that overview. And now I'd like to invite our panel moderator and co-founder of the 200 Billion Club, Bridget Greenwood, to introduce themselves and the panel and to kickstart with their session. Over to you, Bridget.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to introduce myself first and then talk about the panel and then invite our esteemed panelists to be able to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into the meat of what does the landscape look like for founders, what can VCs do, and what do we look for in the horizon. But first of all, of course, I want to thank KiwiTech for hosting this event, highlighting the need for female founders to get the resources and contacts that they need. So my name is Bridget Greenwood. I have been supporting women in their careers for the last 10 years or so. In 2017, I came into the blockchain space. I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Everyone has their rabbit hole story. And I joined a startup. And in that time, I recognized that this technology has far more wide-reaching ways of how it could be innovative than just in the financial sector. And what's truly innovative about blockchain technology when it's used at its core is it's peer-to-peer, it's borderless, we can choose, it's permissionless, so we can now choose who we want to exchange value with. And that's only going to happen and be using that innovation if we have the right people building. So if we look across the globe, women have one thing in common to varying degrees and quite substantial varying degrees, but one thing in common is that women generally have less access to capital and finance, are not rewarded in the same way financially as their male counterparts, and do an awful lot of invisible work that they don't get paid for. The idea of also having to be flexible in what you earn and how you earn is very important for women, and I think for just the future of work. So this technology has the opportunity to be able to shift and change how we do business, how we interact, and how people operate. But the only people who are going to build, though, with that innovation in mind are the people who understand the problems that they face. So we need to have women involved. We need to have everyone involved at the design, development, and deployment table. So I started a community in 2019 that supported women in blockchain. Largely, it's called Web3 now, crypto blockchain. I'm sure it'll be called something else soon, and we all know that the word metaverse is bandied around. And it was in that journey that I was thinking, okay, I was learning about the technology, and I was also really learning about why don't we have anywhere near the female equity that we should have. In the 90s, when I was in my 20s, you know, graduating from university, there was a pretty good mix. But unfortunately, as we get older and as the seniority of our years progress, we notice that disparity changes a lot. And there's lots of data to support that. Women are doing the education. They're doing everything that they've been asked for, but there's a first rung ladder issue, it's called. And then we see the law system is also a great one, as well as tech. But when you look at the top, we don't have the same parity of women. So role models are incredibly important. And then we think about the role models when it comes to tech, then everyone knows 5 CEOs that they can name off the top of their head without really thinking, and they are various ages, and they don't even have to be interested in tech. But it's your Bezos and your Jobs and your Gates. And they were co-founders, they were the founders, and now they're running global empires. And I couldn't understand why we didn't have female role models in the same way until I discovered that the stats for female founders getting VC funding is disgraceful. I think there's no other way to express that. So if you look at all female teams, pre-pandemic, 3%, 8% for mixed teams, and the rest, sort of 90%, go to all male founded teams. And it's not because we don't have women who are capable, who are putting themselves forward, not at those percentages. And what I find very disappointing is that we look at post-pandemic, that actually has halved. Southeast Asia, I saw a report of last year, 17.5% of the female founders got VC funding. So I think it's very important that we look at what they're doing and see how we can learn from what's actually working. But I think we can all agree when the population of the globe is slightly in women's favor in terms of the amount of women who are around, at 17.5% is still not a figure that we can rest on our laurels for. So in that journey, that's when I formed the Bigger Pie, not the Bigger Pie, the 200 Billion Club with my fantastic co-founder, Amber Gadar. I met her on her journey of raising funds as a female founder. She is, like so many incredible women, and I'm sure all of you on this call can relate to. I have one language and one degree, but pretty much everyone else in the space that I work with speak multiple languages, have multiple degrees, have career histories that we're all incredibly proud of. And then they're building, you're founders, you're building, you have a vision of something that you want to see in the future. And largely those visions and the products and the services that you want to bring, yes, they're profitable, but they also actually help to lift society up. So we decided to have a look at what does that look like. Having gone through her own journey, Amber was successful in her raise, but when she looked at how that was comparatively to her male colleagues, they were raising checks twice the size in half the time. And that's when I explained to her the concept of unconscious bias. So unconscious bias exists everywhere in very, very broad terms. Men are judged on their promise and women have to defend their positions. And that happens, of course, everywhere. The interesting thing about bias is that we're all exposed to the media, the stories, everything else. So we as women fall prey to the bias as much as men do. And it's about how we understand and learn to shift in that. Anyway, so we did a 3-month journey into the research to say, okay, what's going on in the VC space when it comes to getting brilliant female founders access to the funding that they deserve? It's going to be great for the female founders. It's going to be great for the products and services they bring out. And it's going to be great for the VCs who invest in them. And what we looked at and we saw was that there are 2 main parts in the VC journey. The first 2 parts, really. It's how do you get access to the VCs and the deal flow? And then how is that deal flow assessed? So 82% of all VC-backed startups come from a warm introduction. You are 13 times more likely, 1,300%, right? More likely to get to the investment committee if you have a warm introduction. But if most of the VCs are in the male network, how does a woman break through and get that warm introduction? So that's one of the things that we do. And we have 200 plus VC partners that we're building every day, where we know and understand their investment thesis. And Eleanor, who you're going to meet shortly, is one of those VC partners. And so we can smartly, intelligently, and with trust, match our founders to these VCs with the right investment thesis. And our VC partners are also very active in the fact that they understand and want to have more access to underrepresented, overlooked founders that they might not have access to the pipeline to make sure that they can be able to have the opportunity to invest where they feel it's right. The second part of the process is actually when you start to pitch. And this is when the bias really kicks in. It's less difficult to overcome. 2 studies that I want to mention to you. One is the quite famous research, and many of you on the call might know about it. It was published in the Harvard Business Review. Going back to men being judged on their promise and women having to defend themselves, it suggested, and it found out that basically female founders are asked preventive questions. That's all about the defensibility and the risk of their startup. Male founders are asked more promotive questions, which is all about the opportunity and the growth of their startup. And why is that important? Because you're 5 times less likely to be successful and to raise when you're answering questions about risk and defensibility than you are when you ask promotive questions. Now, there is good news, because if you can recognize a preventive question and be able to respond in a promotive way, then you can bypass that bias that happens. The second important part that we support in our journey in the 200 Billion Club as an accelerator program where we coach founders what it is they need to be able to pitch to VCs is comes from some research called Don't Pitch Like a Girl. So Don't Pitch Like a Girl basically looked at 4 cohorts, and they said, right, male founders with what is considered male leadership traits, male founders which is considered female leadership traits, female founders with male leadership traits, and female founders with female leadership traits. Now, no surprise to anyone on this call, if you're a male founder with male leadership traits, you were preferred by VCs. But what was interesting is you're a female founder with male leadership traits, you were second most favored, and female founders with female leadership traits were the least favored. Now, I find that interesting because if we look at data, the data is more available, especially since we've had COVID, that if you look in economic turmoil and times of lots of change, it's actually female leadership traits that are shown to do best in these economic climates. So I would be fascinated, and this is part of what we're doing today, is understanding and being able to shift to allow VCs to better understand data points, what's happening, and understanding the right traits, the right leadership skills, the right analytics when they're looking at investing in founders that can overcome their biases. So the 200 Billion Club, we launched our first cohort last year, and we're very happy with the success. We have, it was sector agnostic. And then this year, because both Amber and I do come from the blockchain and Web3 world, this first quarter, we're doing a Web3 cohort. But enough about me. I would very much like to be able to ask Anne to be able to, so both Anne, a global investor, and Enelo, as I mentioned, is one of our VC partners, all part of the ecosystem along with KiwiTech, to be able to support our female founders. So Anne, please introduce yourself and give everyone a bit of color about where you've come from, what you do, and why I've chosen you for the panel.
Thank you so much, Bridget, for that introduction. And thank you for all the great work you're doing at 200 Billion Club. We are really proud at Global Investor to partner with you guys and look forward to many more opportunities. And also thank you so much to KiwiTech for this wonderful opportunity. And thank you for all the amazing work. My goodness, did you see what Amy said on the slides? I was blown away with what you've been doing. So kudos to you. And to your point, Bridget, we really need as an ecosystem to work together. Yeah, we need to work together to change the system, and we can. So who am I? I am founder and CEO of Global Invest Her. So I had a 25-year career in global business, in management consulting and leadership training before I decided to become an entrepreneur myself. Now, I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I set up my company in 2013, 10 years ago, because I went to an event in London. I went to an event organized by the Cherie Blair Foundation. And I was in the audience, like many of you here. And I put my hand up and I asked the founder who was speaking what her greatest challenge was. And she said it was access to funding. And I said, I had that light bulb moment where, like you see in the cartoons. And I asked myself, is it harder for women to get funding? So I started to get curious, and like Bridget talked about the rabbit hole she went down in blockchain, I went down the rabbit hole in access to funding for women entrepreneurs. And this is 2013, before this was a hot topic. This is 10 years ago and nobody was talking about it. What I discovered at the time was there was a report by the IFC, the World Bank, part of that IFC, that said that the global credit gap between male and female entrepreneurs at the time was estimated to be $300 billion. That blew my mind because my biggest value is equality and respect. And you see I have here behind me, it says feminist. A feminist is someone who believes in equal opportunity for men and women. And I am a really strong feminist. So to see that this huge gap of $300 billion, it drove me mad. So I decided to create Global Invest Her to help educate more women entrepreneurs, to basically say, hey, this is what you need to do to get investor ready, and to help educate the investors to say, hey, you're missing out on an incredible opportunity because you're not investing in wonderful women, diverse founders. And so over the years, we've done many different things, education, we've done courses, master classes, like so many webinars. I have interviewed hundreds of women entrepreneurs and investors. And most recently during COVID, in 2020, we launched the first global directory of women founders called the Founder Directory, where we basically showcase companies by women entrepreneurs because we wanted them. I said, how can we help women when we're all locked down during COVID? How can we help the women entrepreneurs? So we created the database so that they could be found. You could be found by both potential customers and potential investors. So that was the Founder Directory. And most recently in the last few weeks, we have launched the Funder Directory, which is the first global directory of sources of funding ranked by how women founder friendly they are. Like if you had a magic wand and you could say, how can you find the right sources of funding, the funders, and I use that word on purpose, it's not investor because it includes banks, grants, crowdfunding, accelerators, incubators, angel networks, VCs, and more, right? So it's the whole spectrum. And basically we independently rank them by how women founder friendly. So have they actually invested in women entrepreneurs? Do they have women investors like Ella? Do they have a woman investor who can actually write the check? She's not someone who doesn't have an influential role in the decision making. Do they actually show that they support women entrepreneurs through their website? Have they signed charters like Diversity VC or ESG? Do they measure their portfolio and they're investing with a gender lens? Now that's harder to check for, but we check for it. And it's basically, do they count? Like, are they checking? Do they know what percentage of women in their portfolio there are, or if not? And lastly, but not least, do they focus, yes or no, entirely on women entrepreneurs? So you get a rank between 1 and 5 to see how great you are. So we launched that a couple of weeks ago, and it's like going like crazy. It's super, super exciting. And I'll have a link to share with you tomorrow because we're doing a webinar to show you inside so you can see all about it. But really, what's important, you hear the passion. I'm a woman entrepreneur advocating and working for you, creating the tools and the services to help make things better so that you get more funding. I also happen to be a global advocate on women's economic empowerment. So I did a TEDx talk. I shared the link in the chat here so you could see. I talked about exactly what Bridget was saying, all that unconscious bias. I talked about that in 2013, before there were loads more TED Talks, where I was pulling out, so you'll see statistics from the time. They were the same or like just barely different from now. And in fact, I talked about the global gender gap and how long it would take for women to get to gender parity. At the time, it was 89 years. Now it's like 237 years. It's something ridiculous. It's going backwards, right? Post-COVID. And that funding gap that I told you about 2013 that stimulated me to create our company, that was $300 billion before COVID. In 10 years ago. Before COVID, in 2019, that gap had then grown to $1.7 trillion. So we got a lot of work to do, ladies, to change the system, and men to change the system, because we can't change it without you. So part of my advocacy work, not only am I in the trenches with you, working to create the tools and services to help connect you with the right investors and to get ready for those pitches, the same way that Bridget and Amber are doing incredible work at the 200 Billion Club, and you get your tech with KiwiTech. I'm also working on public policy. So I'm part of the W20. I'm head of the EU delegation to the W20, which is the official engagement group to the G20 countries. And we make policy recommendations specifically for women, to do with women. And so I work specifically on women's entrepreneurship and access to finance. So that's me in a nutshell. I just want to say I'm proud to be here. I'm proud we're having this conversation, and thank you, KiwiTech, for doing it. I can't wait to hear from Ella. I want to pass the word over to her because she's awesome. Wait till you hear about her. And this is about all of us supporting each other and helping to change the system. Yeah, we can do it together. We can't do it alone. So there you go. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Anne. And Elle, as Anne said, you're really important to the female founders because you're the one who can write the check. So please introduce yourself, your background, tell us more about ProFounder Capital and your own personal insights and views.
Absolutely, happy to. Well, hello everyone. Really, really happy and proud to be here. Thank you so much to the 200 Billion Club and KiwiTech. I mean, my background is probably not going to be as impressive as Anne's, but I'll try to, let's say, hold my own. I'm Italian and I've been in London for the past 5 years. I moved here to invest in pre-seed companies within the health tech, biotech, and life sciences space. And I have to admit, at the time, I, of course, knew about the gender gap and I was aware of it, but I was one of the blessed ones that didn't really have to feel it on their skin. Actually, STEM, I realized, is one of the best spaces for females. We had 50% split within our gender split for founders, and life was good. They were getting funded. After 2 years of that, I actually became a founder myself in one of those mixed teams. And it was a wellness AI-based startup. And we did get funding from Techstars. We went through the program, and all the story of all, me and my co-founder disagreed on how to proceed with things, let's say. So I decided to leave the company, and actually Techstars hired me as their investment manager. So what I was doing is I was supporting founders to access capital after the accelerator program was over. So I was connecting them with the right investors all across Europe and beyond. And when I got into a generalist fund, that really made me way more painfully aware of the dire situation. Before we had kind of naturally enough females. I was a female founder that got funded. And after that, the world became very scary, or at least my eyes opened to how scary that was. I did that for a year, and then Pro Founders Capital, where I'm a principal at now, called me up. I had pitched them my company. They had said no to the company, but then they wanted to hire me. So I consider them one of the good ones, I guess. We do seed stage investments all across Europe, agnostic. So we do B2B, B2C all across the board. And we don't have nearly enough female founders within our portfolio. And I am the only woman in the investment team, 25% of the investment team. So let's say the statistics are not terrible. We're a smaller team, but it became so apparent quite naturally to me that I wanted to look for more women to talk to even. I would spend a whole week not having a meeting with a woman founder. And I started really A, missing it, B, being extremely concerned about it. And I knew about the situation again, but I guess I started feeling it on my skin way more. So I started connecting with all the possible entities that I could find that were supporting and promoting female founders. The $200 billion club, of course, was one of them. And I was really happy to see their first batch of companies, looking forward to the next ones. And yeah, generally speaking, constantly involved in trying to elevate women and support them in their fundraising journey. And hopefully one day we will not need female focused groups because the playing field will be leveled. But for as long as we need them, I'm happy to support the cause.
100%. I mean, I was on a panel the other day and I said, it's not that we want to be here. We want to be getting on with doing the work, right? But until such time as the statistics get even slightly closer, as opposed to backwards, then this work has to continue. So you've met our panelists. Absolutely. So you've met our panelists, and what we want to do over the next 15 minutes that we have is to explore the landscape of female founders, how venture capitalists can support their success. Our expert panelists are going to share their perspectives on best practices, resources, strategies for empowering female founders in the startup world, and even in our introductions, I think we've already touched on a few of those. We're going to discuss the challenges that women face in the male-dominated industry and ways to overcome them. And we'll also examine the latest trends and opportunities in the venture capital landscape and how women founders can tap into them. So this is designed to empower you as female founders. And the best way that I think that we can also do that is to please make sure, whilst you have access to this talent, and I'm sure that some of the KiwiTech panelists and advocates on here will also be able to put in and chime in with their expertise and their help, particularly with how KiwiTech can help. Please ask those questions, because the question that you're thinking that you want to ask, everyone else in the audience is also thinking, what a great question. I wish I had asked that. So let's start with the resources, because KiwiTech, we're all basically resources. So Anne, you're a female founder, you're a first-time female founder particularly, so there's all that more that you need to learn. if you could give them the advice of what would you do, where would you go, how would you find the resources? Because yes, we're here and we're going to listen to some pitches and you know, L writes checks, but VC funding is quite expensive. It's in fact possibly the most expensive way to get funding. So before we dive into the VC world, let's talk about the different funding sources that are available.
I love it. Thank you, Bridget. And Elle's going to tell you all about the VC world in more detail, and we'll get to that, don't worry. But before you go to VC, when you're very early stage, there are loads of different sources of funding that are out there. And that's very important for you to know. I like to call it the funding menu. So on that funding menu, like you go into the restaurant and you see all the different things that you can have. It's the same thing with sources of funding. So when you're starting out, it's important to look at all the different things that are out there. So check your banks. Now, if you don't have a lot of collateral to start out with, you can still check. Some banks will fund you. Okay, so check what banks that are around that have some programs for women entrepreneurs. You need to check also the government bodies. So the government bodies, wherever you are, they tend to have specific resources. Sometimes they will do some loan guarantees. So if you start off by checking out your local authorities and the government bodies, sometimes they will guarantee the bank loan up to a very high degree. So you don't have to put down a lot of collateral yourself and say, yes, I guarantee my house for 50% of this loan or more. We don't want you to do that. So there are in the government bodies, you will see that there are some institutions that will actually help to guarantee your loans. Of course, then we're going to go down the crowdfunding route. Okay, crowdfunding. You have loads of different types of crowdfunding. Here, particularly, if you have a B2C company, it can be very interesting to do reward-based crowdfunding to test the market, to show traction, as well as build your community. So that's interesting. Of course, I will be pushing the equity crowdfunding. And in the UK, you are so lucky because it's the UK was the ones that actually designed and created equity crowdfunding in 2011 with Crowdcube. So now, thankfully, it's over in the States and all over the world. We now have equity crowdfunding. So you want to check that, where you can actually use your crowd, leverage your crowd to access to give part of the equity of your company. And the Jobs Act in the US has done a great job of making that more accessible and creating the tax incentives. Of course, you'll hear of the friends and family and fools round. And that's basically where you tap on the shoulders of the people who know and love you, especially in the early rounds. They're people you need to tap on their shoulders and say, okay, can you invest in us? And it has to be money that they can afford to lose, of course. Okay, you don't want anybody, you want to be able to sit around the Thanksgiving table or the Christmas dinner table or whatever table it is that you are, and be able to look at those friends and family in the face without feeling terrible because it hasn't, worked out for them from an investment perspective. So it's important to see, when you're looking at your friends and family around the very early stages, you should be thinking about everybody, your past colleagues. Look at what Elle explained in her career trajectory. Like, she was hired here and hired there and everywhere. You can have past colleagues that you can tap on the shoulder, and they could be super interested in what you're building. I think, of course, then we would need to talk about angels and angel networks. So a business angel is a person like you and me who's going to invest their personal money into your startup. And so you can go different ways with angels. It can be just individuals from your network. It can also be angel syndicates. It could be specific angel networks. And there are great angel networks in the US and in the UK and around the world. So I would encourage you to look at that. Of course, I'm going to mention accelerators and incubators. So Techstars is one of the best accelerators in the world. And I had the extreme pleasure of interviewing Nicole Glaros, who is the Chief Investment Strategy Officer of Techstars. She's basically part of the brain that created the whole accelerator model 20 years ago, right? That came from her brain. And so Techstars, Y Combinator, you know them, all these big ones, 200 Billion Club. If you're in the UK, you want to be going through their program. And what you're going to get there is they're going to put you through a boot camp to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to actually build a company that's going to be able to scale, right? So if you want to be able to attract further investment, you want to be looking at the accelerators. They tend to be 3-month programs. Now with COVID, loads of them go online, which is good for women founders who may have family or care commitments on the side, as we do. As Bridget rightfully said, we have all these other commitments as well. So you want to be checking out the accelerator program. So there's some of the key things that I would say. And at the very beginning, when you're starting out, your best friend is your credit card. Sometimes you're going to max out the credit card for some of those first expenses that you need to invest in the company. I don't encourage you to do that long term, but there's some of the different sources of funding. There's a lot out there. Of course, forgot to mention, and shouldn't forget to mention, grants. There are grant organizations. And the thing with grants is that they take time to fill in the paperwork. They ask you for tons of information. Sometimes you have to go through the process several times before you can get it. It's still worth looking into. You just need to be very careful as to where you invest your time with those grants, is what I would say. So I hope that's a good roundabout, because I want to let Elle talk about VC, because that's her land, that's her space. And of course, I work a lot with VCs too, which I'm going to let Elle talk more about that.
Thank you. And just before Elle talks about the VC side of funding, for any of you who haven't yet played around with ChatGPT, a lot of grant applications are successful because you hire a grant writer, right? And that's more funds for you to be able to, as an outlay, without obviously any guarantee that you might be able to get that grant. They'll be able to assess which grant is best suited for you. They know how to fill out the grant application because they have the experience of it. They understand why other people have been rejected, and so they have value in that. But I was working with someone who does a lot of grant writing, a lot of EU grant writing. And I said to her, I was literally on a Zoom like this, and I shared my screen. I said, tell me the proposal you're putting together. And then I asked ChatGPT to say, this is the proposal for this grant, the EU grant. Please, can you write the outline? And these are the outcomes that we want. And she saw it just typing up in front of her and went, it's taken us 2 weeks to do that. So we need to leverage and use tools and technology as and when we can. And so if anyone wants to know a bit more about ChatGPT, then I'm sure Natalia will be able to share some resources that they and that we have as well. So we've looked at the other sources of funding, Al, and let's keep on the first founder sort of trajectory as we go through this learning experience. What are the things that female founders should be thinking about, and what are the common mistakes that you see that they make that we can learn from?
Yeah, absolutely.
And skip.
Hopefully. I'll do a mix of this question and the question from Betsy that I saw in the chat, because I think it's a really interesting point to think about. And the answer to Betsy's question, which was, do female founders tend to solve problems that are more generally associated with females that they encounter in their life? The answer to me is both yes and no. And the reason why this matters is that, yes, I do have a tendency to see companies founded by women that, of course, relate to their life and to the struggles that they encounter, which, if you factor in the fact that we are generally overlooked for most of our problems, generally speaking, around health, ovaries, and children, that's something that pops up quite a bit. The important piece to remember as a first-time founder, if you're a woman, and especially if you're tackling a generally female-related type of issue, is questioning yourself whether the VC route is the right one, or you should go for one of the many avenues that Anne very skillfully explored with us. That is because VC is good at funding a very specific type of company. That's usually a tech company, software, hardware is already super, super hard, and that can scale, has the ambition to be global, make the famous like billion-dollar valuation and all of that. There are so many other types of businesses that are absolutely valuable, that are absolutely necessary, but may not fit that that very niche, if you think about it, definition. So sadly, many of the issues that as a woman, female, we encounter, they relate to slightly more complex topics. They might request a hardware piece. They might request smaller communities, for instance, where they can operate. So not all of these businesses, although absolutely worthy and necessary to exist, are right for VCs. So one of the issues that I encounter oftentimes with female founders is that maybe VC is not the right route for them. So I have to say no because they just don't fit this model, which is sad. But if you're a female founder and you do fit the, let's say, VC route, which I'm by no means saying that women only, let's say, found like pink ovary related companies. I've seen women in blockchain, for instance, and of course, like Bridget, and women in all sorts of, let's say, other topics. Sustainability, for instance, is a big one. I think we're kind of worried about what's happening to this planet. One, I might say, men have done to this planet. If I may say so. So yeah, as a first-time founder, I think the biggest thing is finding a network. And as we mentioned, warm introductions are the best way to go about it. So finding all these key network nodes that are gonna allow you to access more and more people, have conversations with people, is key. The 200 billion club is one of them. There are several, I mean, of course, Global Investor. There are many solutions in this. And one of the things is also get out there. There's plenty of events. We tend to hang out at those. These days, it's a little bit more of a mix between online and offline, which to a degree makes it easier to just pop into a Zoom room and hassle people on the side in the chat. But don't forget about face-to-face contact. We're humans, we like the warmth of connection. And as investors, I mean, yes, we can look at numbers. We can look at, your projections, your financial forecast, which we know is completely imagined because we have no data. So we're going to base our decision a lot on how we feel about you. Do we think you're going to be the right person to bring this company to the next level? And that's human interaction. And as women, we tend to be touted to have more empathy and potentially be more passionate about things, and a little bit, they say emotional, I say passionate. So use that power to convince people that what you're building is necessary and will become huge. Other than that, there are many support solutions on the internet. There's so many forums. There are groups like, I'm thinking about Alpha, for instance. That's a whole forum where women in all stages of life and career ask each other questions and give each other support. So finding those type of communities and kind of using them to move your network around is a very big piece to get in touch with VCs. And of course, when you're doing your little LinkedIn stalking, go for the female VCs. I say, why not? I mean, we're more likely to just take to heart the idea. And yes, sometimes men will not understand why something is a problem, which I have faced myself, trying to explain to my colleagues why something was necessary. And that is a big global issue. Generally speaking, as women, we have not complained enough about things, and we've just let them go. So now men are convinced that everything is fine and nothing needs to change. So you can be vocal as a founder, but you can also be vocal as a woman manifesting the issue, which will in turn convince men and VC men that might be a profitable business.
And so we got 60 seconds left. That was the fastest panel ever. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I know that we could do this all day, Anne and Elle. One of the things that I would just like to say is we're talking about female founders. I'm very conscious that the three of us have quite pale skins, right? So human nature is people like to invest in people that look and sound like them. So at the moment, most of the money is held by men. And so hence the discussion is, if we're talking about solving problems for half of the population, but it's the other half of the population that we're talking to, is there sometimes a problem? Yes. If you put the word black female founder in front of it, those numbers are 3% drop off. You can't even get a whole percent going on. There are a number of founders that are looking for, and there are a number of VCs who are getting more diversity into the VCs who are able to write that check which we definitely need. So when you're looking for your VCs, don't just blanket spread. Look for the VCs that are that understand their investment thesis. If it's around impact, look for those. Look for those who are looking to expand into or already operating in the geographical areas, because I saw the question there about Africa. And yes, do make sure that you can, when you connect with someone, and this is something that we have found with our cohorts in the 200 Billion Club, is men are very happy to boast, almost exaggerate what they've achieved. Women, you're all phenomenal. All the women that we deal with are literally outstanding, and they minimize what they're saying. So a VC cannot read your mind and understand your brilliance. Please, please, please. My one tip for you is make sure that you are as the word is escaping me, as explicit as possible about the years of experience you have, the budgets, the numbers, how you've moved the needle, and why you're the right person right now to lead this company. And on that, I'll say thank you so much for allowing us this time to chat with you. And we look forward to seeing the pictures. Natalia.
Thank you so much, Bridget and Lenora. Thank you so much. There was really amazing 35 minutes of session that we had, and much needed for sure. And I sincerely thank the 200 Billion Club, Bridget, for being a part of our event and their support in curating this amazing panel, like I said, with Anne and Elle. And further, I invite the ladies to stay back for their one-on-one feedback and Q&A round.